The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Council chamber like thunder. Every sensor in the massive station lit up at once, screaming warnings into the void. Something was coming. Something big. Ambassador Ji-Won Lee looked up from her datapad, her heart jumping in her chest. She'd been reviewing trade agreements for the past 3 hours, bored out of her mind. Now her hands shook as she read the incoming message. Human ships. 23 of them. Unscheduled. Unauthorized. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Hundreds of alien species began shouting in their various languages, creating a wall of noise that hurt GH1's ears. She stood up from her seat, trying to see the main display screen. What she saw made her blood run cold. The ships were wrong. Terribly wrong. Human vessels were supposed to be clean, polished, professional. These ships looked like they had crawled out of hell itself. Dark stains covered their white holes. Scorch marks ran along their sides. Entire sections looked like they had been ripped open and hastily welded back together. And the stains, those dark red and black stains, Kuan knew exactly what they were. Blood, double quotes, what have we done? She whispered to herself. The lead ship, a massive battle cruiser called the Indomitable Will, moved forward. It dwarfed the Council's security vessels that scrambled to intercept it. G1 had seen that ship before, 6 months ago at the dedication ceremony. It had been beautiful then, gleaming in the sunlight. Now it looked like a weapon that had been used too many times. Arbiter Velmuth raised all 6 of his crystalline arms, demanding silence. The noise died down slowly. His voice, when he spoke, sounded like wind chimes in a storm. The human fleet will hold position. They will power down weapons. They will explain this. This outrage. Guan wanted to sink into her chair and disappear. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 15 years. 15 years of walking on eggshells, trying to prove they belonged among the stars. And now this. Whatever this was, it would destroy everything they had built. A voice crackled over the communication system. Deep, tired, and absolutely done with everything. This is Captain Hoyanwoo Park of the Earth vessel. Indomitable Will, I request immediate emergency audience with the full council. I invoke Article 7 of the Galactic Accord. The chamber fell silent. Article 7. Defensive Council Species. Ji-Won felt her stomach drop. What had happened out there? Counselor Vex, a large reptilian being who had never liked humans, slammed his clawed hand on his desk. You invoke Article 7 while arriving in vessels covered in blood? You dare? I dare, because I must. Hyan-Woo's voice came back, steady as stone. What we carry on our hulls is the price we paid. The price the Kalathi paid. The price everyone pays when the council moves too slowly. The Kalathi. Ji-Won grabbed her datapad with shaking hands, searching for recent reports. The Kalathi were philosophers, peaceful telepathic beings, who spent their time contemplating the universe. They had no weapons, no military, no defense fleet. They relied entirely on council protection. She found the report buried in her messages from 3 months ago. A distress call. The Kalathi homeworld had gone silent. The council had formed a committee to investigate. Standard procedure. Estimated response time, 6 months. 3 months ago, Ji-Won felt sick. Captain Park will be permitted to address the council, Arbiter Velmuth announced. But his fleet will remain in custody. Any aggressive action will be met with immediate termination. Understood, Hyan-Woo replied. We're not here to fight you. We're here to answer for what we did. 20 minutes later, Captain Hyan-Woo Park walked into the council chamber. Ji-Won barely recognized him. The last time she had seen him, he had been giving a speech at a ceremony, all pressed uniform and proud smiles. This man looked like he had aged 10 years. His uniform was clean but worn. Dark circles hung under his eyes. When he walked, he moved like every step hurt, but his back was straight. His head was high. And when he looked at the assembled council, Ji-Won saw no fear in his eyes, only determination. 3 months ago, Hyan-Woo began without preamble. The Kalathi sent a distress call. You all received it. I know you did because I checked the logs. Every species in this chamber heard them screaming for help. He paused, looking around the room. No one spoke. The council formed a committee. Standard procedure, I was told. An investigation would be launched. Aid would be considered. Estimated time for a decision was 6 months. His voice remained calm, but G1 could hear the anger underneath. 6 months while they died. 6 months while they suffered. Counselor Vex rose from his seat. The council has procedures, human. We do not rush into military action without proper consideration. We do not allow individual species to wage war on their own authority. Ayon Wu agreed. You don't, which is why I'm here. To answer for breaking that law, the chamber erupted again. Species shouting about human aggression, about violations of council law, about the dangers of allowing primitive species into their ranks. Kuan felt tears in her eyes. This was it. Humanity would be expelled. Everything they had worked for, gone. Hyunwoo raised his hand. Somehow that simple gesture brought silence. I violated council law, he said clearly. I took my fleet into Kalathi space without authorization. I engaged in military action without council approval. I am guilty of every charge you want to bring against me. He paused. But I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times. Because when I arrived at Kalathi Prime, I found something you need to see. He pressed a button on his wrist device. The main screen lit up with an image that made Ji-won gasp. Others in the chamber cried out in horror. This, Hyun-woo said quietly, is what was happening while we debated proper procedure. The image on the screen showed a Kalathi colony, or what was left of it. Buildings lay in ruins, their elegant curved structures broken like toys. Bodies littered the streets, and in the center of it all stood massive black structures that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Hyun-woo's voice continued, flat and emotionless. 3 months ago, my fleet was on routine patrol near the border of Kalathi space. We were the closest council vessels to their territory. When the distress call came, we heard it. Every telepath on every ship in my fleet felt their scream. He pressed another button. Audio played through the speakers. It wasn't words, not exactly. It was pure emotion. It's translated into sound. Terror, pain, desperation, the psychic scream of an entire species. Facing extinction, Dr. Subin Choi, sitting in the visitor section with other crew members, closed her eyes. She had heard that scream. She heard it every night in her dreams. I contacted Earth Command, Hyun-woo said. I requested permission to investigate. They told me to wait for council authorization. I contacted the council directly. I was told a committee had been formed. I asked how long. 6 months, minimum. He looked directly at Arbiter Velmuth. I made a choice. I chose to act. Commander Dae-jung Kim advised against it. He said we would be court-martialed, that humanity would face expulsion from the council. He was probably right, but I gave the order anyway. The screen changed again. Now it showed the indomitable will and its fleet jumping into Kalathi space. The date stamp showed it was exactly 2 months and 27 days ago. We arrived at Kalath Prime expecting to find a natural disaster, maybe a plague. What we found was an invasion. The next images made several council members leave their seats to vomit. Ji-won forced herself to keep watching. Even as her stomach turned, the creatures on screen looked like insects, but massive and wrong. They stood on 4 legs, had 6 arms, and their heads were covered in eyes. Thousands of them swarmed over Kalathi cities. But they weren't just killing. They were harvesting. The Kryn, Hyun-woo said, and the word sounded like a curse. We had never heard of them before. The Kalathi certainly hadn't. They came from beyond the edge of known space, through a wormhole that appeared 6 weeks before we arrived. The images showed Kalathi being dragged into the black structures. Hundreds of them, thousands, all still alive. All screaming. The Kryn are a hive mind, Hyun-woo explained. They expand their intelligence by consuming the neural tissue of other species. The Kalathi, being naturally telepathic, are particularly valuable to them. Doctor. Subin stood up, her voice shaking. May I speak, Captain? Hyunwoo nodded. She faced the council, her hands clenched into fists. I'm the chief medical officer. I examined both Kryn biology and what they did to the Kalathi. They weren't just killing them. They were keeping them alive, harvesting their brains piece by piece. The process took weeks. Weeks of agony, while the victim remained conscious. Silence filled the chamber. The kind of silence that pressed down like a physical weight. When we arrived, Hyunwoo continued, we counted approximately 40 million Kryn across 4 Kalathi colonies. We also detected nearly 90,000 Kalathi still alive in their processing centers. Every day we waited. Hundreds more would die. Every hour, dozens more would be harvested. Commander Dae-jun stood next, his face hard as iron. The captain called a meeting with all senior officers. He laid out the situation. We were 23 ships against an enemy that numbered in the millions. We had no authorization, no support, no backup coming. He asked us to vote. Dae-jung smiled, but there was no humor in it. 23 captains, 23 votes. It was unanimous. We would fight. The screen showed the beginning of the battle. Human ships diving into Kalathi atmosphere, weapons blazing. The Kryn swarmed them like angry wasps. Their bioships were fast, organic things that moved in ways that made no sense. We couldn't just bombard them from orbit, Hyunwoo said. The Kalathi prisoners were scattered throughout the processing centers. We had to go in. Ship to ship, hand to hand if necessary. The footage shifted to helmet cameras. Human Marines fighting through nightmare corridors. The Kryn were horrifying up close, all clicking mandibles and razor-sharp limbs. But the humans pushed forward anyway, step by bloody step. Gi-won watched Lieutenant Taeyang's Song leading his squadron into a Kryn bioship. They used cutting torches to breach the hull. The Kryn swarmed them immediately. The fighting was savage, brutal, desperate. Humans fell. Kryn died in heaps. And in the center of the ship, they found 300 Kalathi, strapped 2 tables, some already partially harvested. We fought for 6 weeks, Hyunwoo said quietly. 6 weeks of running battles across 4 worlds. The Kryn had the numbers. We had desperation. He showed them more footage. Sergeant Hejin Nam holding a corridor for 16 hours straight while Kalathi evacuees fled behind her. Her armor was covered in acid burns and claw marks. But she never left her post. He showed them the crew of the destroyer Defiant, their ship crippled. Ramming a Kryn biofactory to give other vessels. It's time to rescue prisoners. He showed them Marines fighting with knives when their guns ran empty. Fighting with tools when their knives broke. Fighting with bare hands when they had nothing else. We lost 8 ships, Hyunwoo said. 4,216 personnel gave their lives. Good people. Brave people. People who knew they were breaking council law, but chose to do it anyway. The screen showed the final tally. The Kryn fleet, broken and retreating. The rescued Kalathi, 9,312 survivors, being loaded onto human ships. We saved them, Hyunwoo said simply. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But we saved who we could. He turned back to face the council. I refuse to let my crews clean the ships before coming here. The blood on our hulls belongs to my people and to the Kalathi who died before we could reach them. I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to see the cost of proper procedure. His voice grew harder. I violated your laws. I offer no excuse. But I would do it again. Every single time. Because while you were forming committees and following procedures, people were dying. And I'm sorry, but I can't accept a system where following the rules is more important than saving lives. The council chamber was silent as a tomb. Every eye was fixed on the human captain standing before them, covered in invisible blood, unrepentant and unbowed. Counselor Thex finally spoke, his voice much quieter than before. What you describe is vigilantism. Chaos. If every species acted on their own authority, the council would mean nothing. Council means nothing if it can't protect its own people. Hyunwoo replied. The footage continued to play on the massive screens surrounding the council chamber. Hyunwoo had ordered every moment of the battle documented. Now the council would see what humanity had done in their name, whether they wanted to or not. The scene shifted to a fighter cockpit. Lieutenant Tae Yong Song's voice crackled through, young and afraid, but steady. "This is Shadow Leader. We found the main processing station. Sensors show approximately 3,000 Kalathi inside. Heavy Kryn presence. Request permission to engage." "Permission granted," came Hyan Wu's voice, distant and crackling with static. "Get our people out of there, Shadow Leader." What followed was chaos. Taeyong's squadron, 12 fighters strong, dove through a swarm of Kryn bioships. The enemy vessels moved like schools of fish, organic and fluid. They surrounded the human fighters, trying to crush them through sheer numbers. "Break left, break left." Someone screamed. A fighter exploded. Then another. The council watched as young pilots died trying to reach the processing station. But the survivors kept going, kept pushing forward through the wall of enemies. Taeyong's fighter took a hit that tore off half his left wing. The craft spun wildly, but he managed to stabilize it. "Still flying?" he gasped. Still in the fight. They reached the station. What was left of the squadron, 4 fighters out of 12, strafed the entrance. The massive doors buckled under their weapons' fire, and then the Marines went in. Sergeant Haijanam led the assault. Her helmet camera showed the inside of the processing station, and it was worse than any nightmare. The Kalathi hung from hooks, their bodies opened up, their neural tissue being slowly extracted by Kryn machines. Some had been there for weeks. They were still alive. Still conscious, still suffering. Medics forward. Haijan's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "Get cutting tools. Get these people down. Now." The Kryn swarmed from every direction. They had been waiting. It was a trap. It's a contact rear. Contact left. They're everywhere. The Marines formed a defensive circle, their weapons creating a wall of fire. The Kryn kept coming anyway, climbing over their own dead. Driven by their hive mind to stop the rescue, Haijan stood at the center, coordinating the defense while medics worked frantically to free the Kalathi prisoners. "Hold the line. Nobody breaks. Nobody runs." A Kryn warrior, larger than the others, charged through the gunfire. Its armored carapace shrugged off bullets. It reached the defensive line and killed 2 Marines before Haijan tackled it. She stabbed it with her combat knife, over and over, her screams of fury mixing with its dying shrieks. The battle lasted 16 hours. 16 hours of constant fighting while the medics worked. Every minute felt like an eternity. Marines ran out of ammunition and fought with knives. They ran out of knives and fought with their tools. When they had nothing else, they fought with their hands and teeth. Dr. Subin worked in the middle of the chaos, trying to keep the rescued Kalathi alive. Many were too far gone, their bodies too damaged. She held them as they died, whispering comfort in a language they couldn't understand but could feel through her emotions. The Kalathi were telepaths. They knew she cared. They knew she was trying. "We got 2,800, Haijan reported when it was finally over. Her voice was hollow, exhausted. 200 died before we could get them down. We lost 23 Marines." The screen showed her sitting among the survivors, both human and Kalathi, all of them covered in blood and worse things. She was crying, though she probably didn't realize it. The council watched in silence as the footage moved to another battle. The cruiser Relentless had found a Kryn bioship carrying 12,000 Kalathi prisoners. The cruiser was damaged, its weapons mostly offline, but between it and the bioship stood nothing but empty space. Captain Min Ho Yoon made a choice. He ordered all non-essential crew to evacuate, then rammed his ship into the bioship's engines. Both vessels went down together, crashing onto the surface of Kalath Prime. The crash killed everyone on the Relentless, but it also crippled the bioship long enough for rescue teams to reach it. They saved 11,400 Kalathi from that wreck. Captain Yoon and his volunteer crew of 212 saved them with their lives. More footage played. The destroyer, Valiant, engines dead, floating in space while Kryn bioships circled it like sharks. The crew could have surrendered. The Kryn were known to take prisoners. Instead, they loaded every weapon they had left, overcharged their reactor, and detonated it when the enemy closed in. The explosion took out 47 Kryn vessels. Commander Dejong's voice narrated the next sequence. The battle reached its peak on day 38. We had rescued 60,000 Kalathi, but we'd lost 6 ships. The Kryn were adapting to our tactics. We were losing. The screen showed the bridge of the indomitable will. Han Wu stood at the center, looking at tactical displays that showed nothing but red enemy markers. "They're going to overwhelm us," someone said. "Then we make them pay for every meter," Han Wu replied. "All ships. Tight formation. We're going to punch through their center, straight to the main processing complex. Everything we have left goes into this one strike." What followed was the most desperate hour of the entire battle. Every human ship, damaged and limping, formed a spearhead and drove straight into the heart of the Kryn fleet. They didn't try to fight all the enemies. They just pushed forward, weapons blazing, taking hit after hit. Ships fell away, too damaged to continue. The indomitable will's armor was breached in 17 places. Fires raged through 3 decks. But Han Wu kept going, kept pushing forward. They reached the main complex. Inside were 17,000 Kalathi prisoners. The last major group still alive? All Marines. "Prepare for boarding action," Han Wu ordered. "We're taking that station." The Marines launched, flying through space in their armor while the fleet provided covering fire. They hit the station like a hammer, breaching it in a dozen places at once. The Kryn were ready. The fighting inside was savage beyond description. A young Kalathi named Meelseth watched from inside a holding cell as humans fought to reach them. She watched Marines die protecting prisoners they'd never met. She watched a human soldier, both legs broken, drag himself forward to shield Kalathi children from Kryn weapons fire. She watched Sergeant Hai-Jin, already wounded in 4 places, pick up a dropped plasma torch and cut through the cell doors. "Come on," Hai-Jin gasped. "We're leaving now." The evacuation was chaos. Humans and Kalathi running through corridors while the Kryn pursued. Behind them, demolition teams were setting charges to destroy the complex. Ahead, the remaining human ships fought desperately to keep the landing zones clear. They made it out with minutes to spare. The charges detonated, and the main processing complex collapsed into fire and debris. 17,000 Kalathi escaped. Over 300 Marines died buying them that escape. The final footage showed the aftermath. The Kryn fleet, broken and scattered, retreating back toward their wormhole. The human fleet, barely holding together, limping away with every rescued Kalathi they could carry. 9,312, Han Wu said quietly. "That's how many we saved. 4,216 of my people died doing it. 8 ships destroyed. 15 more damaged so badly, they'll never fly again." He looked around the council chamber. "The blood on our ships comes from both species, human and Kalathi, mixed together. We couldn't clean it off, even if we wanted to. It's baked into the hull plating from atmospheric re-entry. It's a permanent reminder of what we did and what it cost." The council chamber remained silent for a long time after the footage ended. Han Wu stood in the center, waiting for judgment. He looked tired enough to collapse, but his back stayed straight. Around him, hundreds of alien species stared with expressions, ranging from horror to anger to something that might have been shame. Arbiter Velmuth was the first to speak. His crystalline body shifted, creating sounds like breaking glass. "Captain Park, what you have shown us is disturbing. Both the Kryn atrocities and your response to them. You violated fundamental council law. You engaged in military action without authorization. You risked interstellar war." Did Han Wu agreed? "No excuses. No apologies." "Then you admit your crimes?" "I admit my actions. Whether they're crimes is for you to decide." Figure stood from the council seats. Prosecutor Nexum, a being made of what looked like living metal, pointed an accusing finger at Han Wu. "This is exactly why humans should never have been admitted to the council. They are violent, primitive, and dangerous. They see a problem, and their first solution is always bloodshed." Guan wanted to stand up and defend her species, but she knew it would only make things worse. She sat in her seat, hands clenched, watching her people's future balance on a knife's edge. The captain didn't start the bloodshed. A new voice called out. The Kryn did. Everyone turned to look. It was Counselor Yeren, an elderly avian who rarely spoke. She was ancient by any standard, her feathers more gray than blue. She moved slowly down to the chamber floor, her wings trailing behind her. I recognize what I saw in that footage, she continued. I recognize it because I saw the same thing happen to my own species 400 years ago. The chamber went quiet. Everyone knew the story of the Althani Iran's people. Or rather, everyone knew they were extinct. Yeren was the last of her kind. My people were peaceful, Yeren said softly. We had no weapons, no military, no way to defend ourselves. We relied on the Council for protection. And when the Vex came to our world, the Council formed a committee to investigate. They debated proper response protocols. They discussed the legal implications of intervention. Her voice grew harder. By the time they voted to act, my entire species was dead. 7 billion Althani, gone. The Council arrived with a fleet to save us 6 days after the last of my people died. I was off-world at a diplomatic conference. I'm the only survivor. She turned to look at Prosecutor Nexum. So don't talk to me about following procedures. Don't talk to me about proper authorization. I've seen what happens when we value law over life. Nexum's metallic face showed no emotion. That is precisely why we must have strict rules. Without them, chaos reigns. Every species would act on their own authority, waging private wars. The humans proved my point. They saw violence and responded with greater violence. Responded with the only thing that would work. Commander Daejung spoke up. The Kryn don't negotiate. They don't do diplomacy. They're a hive mind focused on one thing: expansion through consumption. Talking to them would have accomplished nothing. You don't know that. Nexum shot back. You didn't try? You went straight to warfare. Actually, we did try. Dr. Subin stood up, holding a datapad. We attempted communication 17 times during the first 3 days. We broadcast in every known language. We tried mathematical sequences. We sent peaceful overtures. The Kryn responded by attacking our communication vessels. She brought up data on the main screen. I studied their biology extensively. The Kryn are barely sentient on an individual level. The hive mind controls everything. Communication with individual Kryn is like trying to talk to a single brain cell. The hive mind itself showed no interest in anything except consuming the Kalathi. Counselor Thex stood from his seat. The large reptilian had been quiet since Hyan Wu's presentation began. Now he looked conflicted, his scaled face showing emotions that were hard to read. I have opposed humanity's inclusion in the Council from the beginning, he said slowly. I believed they were too young, too violent, too unpredictable. Watching this footage has not changed my mind about their violent nature. Hyan Wu's shoulders sagged slightly. This was it. The opposition that would seal humanity's fate. However, Thex continued, and the word hung in the air like a lifeline. I was wrong about something else. I believed that violence was inherently bad, that peaceful species were superior, that the answer to every problem could be found through discussion and debate. He gestured to the dark screens where the footage had played. The Kryn proved me wrong. Some evils cannot be reasoned with. Some threats cannot be negotiated away. Sometimes the only answer to violence is greater violence in defense of the innocent. Lex looked directly at Hyan Wu. You are young, reckless, and violent. You broke our laws. You risked everything on your own authority. And you are also the only species in this chamber who acted when action was needed. While we debated, you saved lives. Real lives. 9,000 souls, who would be dead if you had followed proper procedure. Murmurs spread through the council. Some species shouted in agreement. Others voiced fierce opposition. This sets a dangerous precedent, Nexum argued. If we excuse this, we tell every species they can ignore council law whenever they feel justified. And if we punish this, Yurin countered, we tell every species that we value paperwork more than lives. The debate raged for hours. G1 listened to species after species argue about humanity's fate. Some called for immediate expulsion. Others demanded harsh sanctions. A very few, spoke in humanity's defense. Then the doors to the chamber opened. A group of Kalathi entered, moving slowly. They were thin, damaged, carrying the visible scars of what the Kryn had done to them. At their center walked a young female named Meelsith, the one who had witnessed the battle for the main processing station. The Kalathi survivors request permission to speak, one of them announced. Their telepathic voice translated by machines. Arbiter Velmuth hesitated, then nodded. Granted. Meelsith walked to the center of the chamber, standing beside Hyenwu. She was barely half his height, her pale skin marked with scars from Kryn harvesting tools. When she spoke, every being in the chamber could feel her emotions through the telepathic broadcast. I watched my family die, she said simply. My mother, my father, my 3 siblings. The Kryn took them one by one. They kept me alive to watch. They wanted me to know fear before they harvested me too. Her face ran down her face. I prayed to the council. I prayed every day. I knew you were out there somewhere, debating and discussing. I prayed you would come in time. She looked up at Hyenwu. Then these humans arrived. They didn't know us. We were strangers, but they fought for us anyway. I watched them die, protecting us. I watched a human soldier with broken legs drag himself forward to shield children he'd never met. I watched Sergeant Hajin cut through cell doors while bleeding from 4 wounds. Meelsith turned to face the council. You want to punish them? You want to expel them for saving us? Then you should expel my people too, because we would die for these humans. They earned our loyalty with their blood. Other Kalathi survivors stepped forward, each telling similar stories. Stories of human sacrifice, of Marines fighting with broken bones, of pilots flying damaged ships, of medics who refused to leave until every Kalathi was safe. An elderly Kalathi named Thelaris spoke last. We declare humanity kin in spirit. It is our highest honor, given only to those who prove themselves family through deeds rather than blood. In our 10,000 years of history, we have granted this honor exactly 3 times. Humanity is the 4th. The chamber fell silent again. Arbiter Velmuth raised his arms for silence. The gesture took longer to work this time. The council chamber buzzed with arguments in hundreds of languages. Some species shouted their support for humanity. Others demanded justice for the violation of council law. The debate threatened to tear the entire council apart. We will vote, Velmuth announced, his crystalline voice cutting through the noise. The question is simple. Does humanity remain on the council, or are they expelled for their actions? Giwan felt her heart hammering. Everything came down to this moment. 15 years of diplomacy, of careful relationship building, of proving humanity belonged among the stars. All of it could end with a single vote. Before we vote, a new voice called out. I believe the council should hear from Earth directly. A figure stepped through the main entrance. Admiral Youngmi Shin, Chief of Naval Operations for Earth, walked into the chamber. She wore her full dress uniform, medals gleaming on her chest. Behind her came a full honor guard of Marines, but it was what followed the honor guard that made the chamber gasp. Through the massive windows, ships appeared. Dozens of them. Human warships, fresh from Earth, taking up position around the council station. Is this a threat? Prosecutor Nexim demanded. Do humans respond to judgment with military force? No, Youngmi replied calmly. This is reinforcement. Captain Park and his fleet saved 9,000 Kalathi. But the Kryn are still out there. Their main hive escaped back through their wormhole. They will return with greater numbers. When they do, someone needs to protect the Kalathi homeworld. She looked around the chamber. Earth sent me with 40 ships and authorization to stay in Kalathi space for as long as necessary. Whether we're part of the council or not, we will defend those we saved. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Counselor Thex made a sound that might have been a laugh. You arrive with a fleet while your captain stands trial? The irony is not lost. The ships aren't here to intimidate the council, Yummy said. They're here because the job isn't finished. Captain Park started something that needs to be completed. The Clothy deserve protection while you debate the legality of saving them. Arbiter Velmuth studied the human admiral for a long moment. Your species continues to surprise us, Admiral Shin. You break our laws, then offer to continue breaking them for the greater good. We're offering to do what's right, Young Mi corrected. If that means breaking laws, then perhaps the laws need to change. This is chaos, Nexium protested. This is anarchy. Laws exist for a reason. Laws exist to serve the people, Counselor Yaren interjected. When laws prevent us from saving lives, when following procedure means allowing atrocities, then we must question whether our laws are just. The debate continued for another hour. Finally, Velmuth called for the vote. The question was clear: expulsion or exoneration. The council would decide humanity's fate. The vote began. Each species cast their decision, and the results appeared on the massive display screens. The chamber watched in tense silence as the numbers climbed. For expulsion, 42 species. Against expulsion, 42 species. A perfect tie. The deciding vote falls to the arbiter, Velmuth announced. His crystalline body seemed to dim as if the weight of the decision was too much to bear. I have served this council for 300 years. I have always valued law, order, and proper procedure. He paused, looking at Heianwu. But I have also failed species like the Elthani. I have watched committees debate while people died. I have seen the cost of moving too slowly. Velmuth's voice grew stronger. Captain Park, you violated our laws. You acted without authorization. You risked interstellar conflict. By every legal standard, you should be expelled and prosecuted. Heianwu nodded, accepting his fate. However, Velmuth continued, you also saved 89,000 lives. You did what the council should have done, but failed to do. You proved that sometimes the right action and the legal action are not the same thing. He raised all 6 of his arms. I vote against expulsion. Humanity will remain on the council. The chamber erupted. Half the species cheered. The other half shouted in protest. Through it all, Heianwu stood quietly, looking like he might collapse from relief. But there must be accountability, Velmuth said, silencing the crowd. We cannot simply excuse violations of council law, even when the intentions are noble. Jiwan felt her brief hope crumble. Here it came. The punishment, the restrictions that would cripple humanity's role in galactic affairs. Therefore, Velmuth announced, I propose the human precedent. A new council law that allows for rapid military intervention in cases of proven atrocity, but with strict oversight and accountability measures. He brought up a document on the screens. Any council species witnessing genocide, mass enslavement, or similar atrocities may act immediately to stop them. However, they must report to the council within 48 hours. Provide complete documentation and submit to investigation. If their actions are found to be justified, they face no penalties. If not, they face expulsion. Counselor Thex stood. And who leads this intervention force? Velmuth looked directly at Heianwu. Captain Park, you started this. You showed us that action is sometimes necessary when debate fails. I propose promoting you to Commodore and placing you in command of a new Council intervention fleet. This fleet will be composed of volunteer ships from any species willing to participate. Its sole purpose will be rapid response to atrocities. The silence that followed was different this time. It was the silence of a council realizing that everything had just changed. Humanity would provide the core fleet, Yummy said carefully. But we cannot do this alone. This needs to be a truly council effort. The Calathi will contribute support ships, Polaris announced. We have no weapons, but we have medical vessels and supplies. We will help protect others as we were protected. The Vex Confederation will provide 12 warships, Counselor Vex said, surprising everyone. I may not like humans, but I respect what they did. And I recognize the necessity of what they're proposing. One by one, other species volunteered. Not all of them. Some still opposed the entire idea, but enough stepped forward to make it work. Prosecutor Nexum shook his metallic head. This is a mistake. You're rewarding lawbreakers. You're encouraging others to ignore proper procedure. No, Yeren replied gently. We're learning from our failures. We're admitting that sometimes our procedures fail the people they're meant to protect. The vote was called on the human precedent. This time, it passed by a solid majority. Not unanimous, but strong enough. Ambassador Biora Kong, Earth's senior diplomat who had arrived during the proceedings, approached G1. Well, we're not expelled. We're not, G1 agreed. But we're also now responsible for being the Council's rapid response force. I'm not sure if we won or got volunteered for the hardest job in the galaxy. Both, Biora said with a tired smile. Definitely both. On the main floor, Hyunwoo stood with Velmoth and the other council leaders. Working out the details of the new fleet, Meelseth and the other Kalathi survivors stood with him, their presence a reminder of why all of this mattered. The Kryn will return, Velmoth said. Your people know this? Yes? We know, Hyunwoo confirmed. That's why Admiral Shin brought reinforcements. We'll protect the Kalathi homeworld until the intervention fleet is ready. After that, we'll protect whoever needs protecting. Your species shames us, Counselor Yeren said quietly. You showed courage where we showed only caution. You acted while we debated. You lost 4,000 people saving strangers. They weren't strangers, Hyunwoo replied. They were people who needed help. That's all that mattered. 2 weeks later, the newly formed Council Intervention Fleet held its first official ceremony. 57 ships from 17 different species, all gathered at the edge of Kalathi space. The human vessels still bore their bloodstains. And now other species had asked to leave them as a reminder. Commodore Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will, looking at the fleet under his command. Human ships, Kalathi support vessels, Vex warships. Even a few ships from species that had initially voted against humanity. All vessels report ready, sir, Commander Daejun announced. Then let's get to work, Hyunwoo said. The Kryn are still out there, and we have a lot of people to protect. The fleet moved out, heading toward the wormhole that the Kryn had used. They would guard it. They would be ready. And when the Kryn returned, as everyone knew they would find not just humanity waiting for them, but the combined strength of species that had decided some things were worth fighting for. Ambassador. Guan watched the fleet depart from the council station. The blood-stained ships that had arrived 2 weeks ago now led a force dedicated to preventing others from suffering the same fate as the Kalathi. Do you think it will work? Biora asked, standing beside her. I think it has to, Ji-won replied. Because the alternative is going back to committees and procedures while people die. Hyunwoo showed us there's a better way. The fleet disappeared into the distance, leaving only the stars behind. Somewhere in the galaxy, people were suffering. But now, for the first time, the council had a way to respond quickly. They had learned that sometimes, doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. The blood on those ships had dried, but it would not be forgotten. It was the price of doing what was right when others would only debate what was legal. Humanity had arrived at the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. And the galaxy would never be the same.